My views, and for the next hour, they're going to be the views of our good friend Dr. Dennis Cuddy, who's taught at the university level, who's been a consultant to industry, who certainly was in the Reagan Department of Education, certainly has written extensively. But of course, we're fortunate to have him with us here every week at this time to give us the information you're not going to get the regular channels, and perhaps we'll even be touching on the Power Elite, Dr. Cuddy's latest book, their history, certainly, and their future. Dr. Cuddy, you pick up the story.
Okay. Well, as usual, I try to make some sort of comments on contemporary issues of the day, and they actually do relate to the book I did, The Power Elite, Their History and Future, that's offered by Radio Liberty, because that book, as the subtitle says, Their History and Future, goes into the background, starting with the Knights Templar about 1,000 years ago, but then it looks at the future. It looks at the 2012 election, and then I said from that what would happen in 2016, and then I said who would be elected then, and I said who would be elected generally in 2024, and to prepare the way for 2025, and what Alice Bailey said would be the rapid shape, the world state, world federation of nations, she said by 2025 would be taking rapid shape, and she said that back in 1933. And so I'll cover about three things in terms of recent or current events before getting into that book, because it all fits. And what I try to do is piece together all of these things, sort of like a puzzle. You have people who do a lot of research, and they see one aspect of it, and they focus, let's say, on the Bilderbergers and so on, but they don't see the overall aspect, and even those who see the overall aspect today don't really have a firm grasp on where it came from and the interrelationship over centuries between movements and groups and who set whom up, and then in turn where that projects into the future. And so I'll use the format of where I am is very, very near. It's only about 4 blocks away from a major university of about 35,000 students. And they have a tremendous number of foreign students there from China, India, everywhere in the sun, Ecuador, Brazil, you name it, they have them there. And so they often come to the shopping center. It's an extremely large shopping center between where I live and the university. So it's like a place with about 80 restaurants and, with different shops and all kinds, Japanese restaurants, all kinds of shops, Hispanic, and you name it, in various fashions, and 2 grocery stores, and, the whole bit. And so you'll see a lot of them around there, and I'll overhear them. Like last night I was in the grocery store, and I heard French, and so I asked the girls what do you speak French, and so I'd say bon nuit, try and converse. And there's one girl works there. She's from Siberia, and then where my mother was in about a year ago in the nursing facility block in the other direction, there's a fellow there from Siberia. So anywhere, they're all over the place. And so, I speak a little Russian to them or something. And so, to use this as an example, the security guard up at the grocery store at night is from Liberia, and he's getting his doctorate in economics. And so we'll spend a fair amount of time when he's not, on duty, and he would say, what are the economic indicators? And I said, well, just watch George Soros, and I explain to him, and I give him these articles about what George Soros did to the British pound in 2010, and in December he's looking like he's going to do the same thing. And, he's very interested in it. And so the next thing would be this woman...
Hold on, Dr. Cuddy. We're going to be back in just a moment with Dr. Dennis Cuddy right here at Radio Liberty. This is Dr. Stan, and of course our guest this afternoon is Friday every week at this time, our good friend Dr. Dennis Cuddy, and he's talking certainly about the sort of international university just a few weeks away from where he is in South Carolina, and is it North Carolina? North Carolina, and basically they have about 35,000 students, so many of them from other countries, and basically they're all there, and he's been talking about certainly conversations with a Liberian security guard, and Dennis is trying to explain to this young man who's taking his degree in economics that certainly things are not as you're being taught in the university. You're being taught the standard things, but basically there is a power elite that runs our country, that runs a great deal of the world. And you go ahead and pick the story up there, Dennis.
Right. And so I get him coming around slowly but surely. He's very studious. And so then I was talking for some time to a woman from Nigeria, and she's from the Christian South. And she was explaining the great falsity of the news that we're getting from ABC and NBC and the rest of them out of Nigeria about Boko Haram and what they're up to. It's like the media has just discovered them, and of course she and I know that they've been around for a long time, and they've been slaughtering, Muslims and Christians and everybody under the sun. And Boko Haram, the expression actually means Western education is bad or sinful like that. They want to really have a strong theocratic Sharia law state there is what they want. But she kept wondering. She said, I want to know where they get the weapons. Where are they getting the money of these weapons? And I said, well, and so I always explained these in terms of this power lead and their master plan. And I said, I had already told her, I told her what happened to Libya and why it happened, why we overthrew Gaddafi at the time we did. And that's important. It's not just that Gaddafi was overthrown, but overthrown at the time that we did, because the power elite projects into the future many, many decades, way in advance. And that's why they prepare people. They prepared a young Bill Clinton for his eventual presidency. They prepare a young Barack Obama for his eventual presidency. They prepare Hillary when she's a girl at Wellesley. And all of this stuff goes on way in advance. And so they will strategically place people. And so I had...
Hold that thought, Dennis. We'll be back in just a moment here. This major university has a chance to talk to, and basically, of course, explaining to them that everything going on is planned, usually many years ahead of time. Why they planned the overthrow of Libya and Egypt and all of these countries over there. And certainly a lot of these students from Africa are trying to make some sense out of what's going on. It doesn't make any sense unless you understand there's a power elite that rules the world. Their ultimate goal is the destruction of existing civilization, a one world government, a one world financial system, and certainly the destruction of Christianity and this imposition of the one world government. And of course, these ideas are somewhat strange to these students from Africa, but go right ahead, Dennis. I'm sure you're convincing these people and pointing out how this is long-range planning to bring us to the crisis situation we're facing today. Go right ahead.
Yes, that's right, and that's what they use. They use crises, they create consternation, chaos, crises, and from that they bring their order, order ab chaos, order out of crisis. And there have been articles, 30, 40 years ago, I remember in Education Digest, there was an article about how you could use crises in education to get the changes that you want. This was from the perspective of a rather progressive or liberal educator. So they've used this strategy in many, many fields all over the place. And so in this particular case, I had previously explained to this woman about Gaddafi was overthrown. We knew that Al-Qaeda was involved in that, as well as the eastern people of Libya revolting against Tripoli in the western part, which was Gaddafi's base. And I had already told her how the Al-Qaeda members, and I said I have their pictures, I have their names, I know who they are. At least 3 of them were given high-profile administrative positions, and one very important one was in charge of border control. And so the weapons that they got by overthrowing Gaddafi went up to, there was 2 movements across Egypt. One went up to the rebels in Syria because we were supporting them covertly, to try and overthrow Assad. Actually, we weren't trying to we're not trying to overthrow it. That's what people, they were trying to overthrow it. No, not really, but we'll get to that later. So we want to create some chaos there, some consternation. So we provide armaments for the rebels in Syria, and a lot of them, in fact, maybe 60-70% went to them. However, specifically the anti-tank weapons I explained to her went across Egypt. Now remember, this is Al Qaeda, border control, and escorted across Egypt with the knowledge of the Muslim Brotherhood, who at the time was in charge in Egypt, to Hamas. Because Hamas said, we have a plan, and as soon as they said we have a plan, and this is before they launched the rockets, I said, I know what your plan is. I know you're going to launch these rockets, and I know why you're going to launch these rockets.
And let me just clarify, what Dr. Cuddy is talking about is we are financing this whole world Islamic terrorist movement, but we can't let the stupid people in America know that. The terrorists are supposedly our enemy. They want to destroy us. Ladies and gentlemen, we created this. We financed this terrorist movement. You have to have an enemy. Because the whole idea is conflict changes the world, and we're moving towards the climax of history and the total disruption of existing society and the supplementation of this new wonderful utopia under it's this small ruling oligarchy. Certainly a two-class system, the very rich, and then the great masses of impoverished and enslaved. Go right ahead.
Yeah, and just as an aside, briefly, when you mentioned oligarchy, I want to reiterate to your listeners that what Jack London, the famous author, Call of the Wild and all that, he wrote The Iron Heel in 1907. It was sort of a forerunner of Orwell's Big Brother, a boot stamping on a human face forever. He called it The Iron Heel. And anyway, in that book in 1907, he said W.J. Gent, G-H-E-N-T's book, Our Benevolent Feudalism, a few years before that, 1901-02, was the model that the oligarchs and plutocrats would use for the future. A benevolent feudalism. At least that's the way it would appear. We'll take care of you. You just go along with us. Don't make waves. We'll see that you're treated kindly, and, you be happy in your lot in life. And let us rule you. We're the new philosopher kings, sort of like that. So anyway, so back to what they did with the rock anti. Anyway, there were two venues. One went across the Syrian rebels, and then the anti-tank weapons went across Egypt from Libya, eastern Libya, up to Hamas to use against Netanyahu and his Israeli forces. They would pound them from the air, but then you can't really finish off Hamas unless you have a ground war. And so usually infantry is led by tanks in the front, and so that's what Netanyahu was doing. He was preparing his ground troops, and he had the tanks, and then all of a sudden he came to a screeching halt because he said, oh my goodness, look, they have gotten from somewhere these anti-tank weapons. Well, that was planned all along. That's one of the reasons why Libya had to go. And of course, that's one reason, perhaps, why Ambassador Stevens had to go as well, because people were starting to sniff the wind in Congress and saying, I wonder if we knew about these weapons going up to Hamas.
Now, basically, of course, what you're talking about is Benghazi scandal, right, where the 4 people were killed. Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, and so I had already told all this to the woman, but I said, well, Boko Haram got them from the same place. She said, are you kidding? Are you serious? Like that? I said, yeah, I'm serious. And so I went out and I got a copy of this article not too long ago. It's May 8th, and it's by Abe Greenwald. He writes for a commentary magazine. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll just read the very beginning here. And I handed it to her, and her jaw sort of dropped. Says, the article just begins like this. Add another drop of tragedy to the story of America's reluctant, no-boots-on-the-ground operation in Libya in 2011. Weapons that were never secured after Muammar Gaddafi's ouster made their way to Boko Haram. See, that's their view, commentary. That's the view of the press. They just made their way.
Just somehow weapons make their way.
Yeah.
Weapons are transported. They're transported by the people we give them to. Go ahead.
That's right. But they just made their way. And the Islamist terrorist group now holding hundreds of Nigerian girls. Last May, Boko Haram staged an attack, so forth and so on. So anyway, it goes on. The attack by Boko Haram that it's talking about had substantial firepower, including machine guns, large numbers of rocket-propelled grenades, the RPGs, the favorite tool of terrorists in Iraq and everywhere else, and pickup trucks mounted with anti-aircraft guns, a sign the weapons flood from the Libyan war that helped rebels seize parts of Mali last year has reached Nigeria, officials say. So Boko Haram isn't just limited to Nigeria. They go up to, they're sneaking over into Cameroon, into Mali, and that whole what's called the Zagreb region there. And they're not going to be limited to that either. And so the Nigerian girl said, well, that's really something. And she